Friendly Neighborhood Master Allen, and we're going to use some allegories to talk about why the Jedi can't win. Now let's put ourselves in a galaxy where the Jedi are fully independent, and so they have no connection to the Republic whatsoever. They are negotiators for peace while also like an emergency response group, and cops. So they are some combination of FEMA and law enforcement and diplomats? Or arbiters, maybe? Anyway. Much though we want to exist in a world where every conflict between two parties can result in a third option that neither side has thought of, where everybody wins. Because it'd be nice. But if we take a super simplified idea of this conflict where we have two species on one planet that are both wanting more than their fair share of the resources from that planet, because how would you define fair? Somebody is going to negotiate the allotments or quotas or whatever, and neither side is going to get what they want. And so both sides are going to feel like they were not treated as fairly by the authority figure that did the negotiation. Or we can use a sports example and just think about all of the times where both teams have been completely happy and satisfied by the officiating in a game that was a high-stakes, important game. Because if one side is happy with the referees, you know the other side is not. And if you are a third party observing the game, if you feel like the referees were pretty balanced, then that probably means both sides are pissed off. So then everywhere the Jedi go to help resolve that type of conflict, when they leave, everybody that's left is unhappy with the Jedi. So we can imagine that there would probably be a very strong demand for there to be governmental oversight to how the Jedi choose to deploy themselves, which is where the Republic comes in. And thus we are operating on the assumption that the Senate and the government are representative voices of the people that elect them, while no representative government has ever been able to successfully do that because people. It can't simultaneously be the Jedi's job to be beholden to the Senate, but also police the Senate. Because you can't be the subordinate and the judge. And so the Republic's inability to keep itself honest isn't the fault of the Jedi. And so the situation that we get observing the Jedi march to the beat of the Republic's drum, so that then it is the voice of the Republic that is asking the Jedi to solve its problems for the greater good of the whole Republic, so that then the Jedi have oversight that is elected oversight rather than, themselves, so that the Watchmen are not watching themselves. And so then we criticize the Jedi for aligning themselves with a body that is more corrupted than them to give them instruction. If it's the other way, then we fairly have the criticism that the Jedi have no oversight, no accountability, and that would be a major problem. That would be a huge red flag for anything like remotely close to law enforcement being able to act unilaterally. Law enforcement for my particular city ran into some issues from a federal investigation. And so even though they are under oversight, it was determined that that oversight was not sufficient to protect the interests of the populace. I can't even imagine what it would be like to live somewhere where there was zero oversight rather than just ineffective oversight. Now, if we think about the Jedi through the lens of them being like FEMA, this is one of the times where they're going to show up and people are going to be excited to see them. So that's a win. But they're not going to be able to save everybody, and they're not going to be able to save everything. And when people are saved, they are happy about being saved, but there's also survivor guilt and other things. And then that's going to put their rage at the people who did the rescuing. Why didn't you do more? Why couldn't you do more? Why weren't you there sooner? All of these things. So reading the High Republic books, the Nihil are a threat that the Jedi are most effective to be deployed against, because it is outside of the society as a whole, and it is targeting the structure of the society. And so then the Jedi are there to protect the people and protect the structure that the people are in. The Galactic Civil War is very different because it's literally different core and rim systems fighting against the rest of the system. It is the structure trying to eat itself. And so there's not an effective way to fight that war if your goal is peace. When you look at the histories of civil wars throughout the world, most of the time what happens is it is a core problem that comes to a head, that it goes to blows, but then in the wake of that the problem doesn't actually go away. The can keeps getting kicked down the road. The American Civil War happened because of all of the compromises from the Revolutionary period, allowing the South to keep slavery until finally it came to a head. And then it was another 100 years after that that segregation ended. The people that needed the National Guard to help them go to the school that they were legally supposed to go to are just now only in their 60s. And now the war of the Galactic Civil War, the ideology is really unclear about what it is exactly the Separatists are fighting for. Because it's not like we have zealots posting manifestos or other things as a part of the Clone Wars arc. And it wasn't a fight over something like slavery, because the Republic had already outlawed slavery, but on the Outer Rim it was still practiced. And the Civil War wasn't about the core all of a sudden wanting to eradicate that. There's no acknowledgement of that outside of the Phantom Menace, really. And that's one of those things about George Lucas as a writer. Like, he would incorporate things for symbolic reasons and then just sort of let that ball drop because he wasn't thinking about the implications of those decisions on a universe standpoint. Like, Anakin's a slave because there's like some Moses analogy that he's trying to make there. Let my people go. And Lucas really could have made some commentary with that, but he basically just ignores it like it wasn't that big a deal. Doesn't get referenced by Anakin again in the movies. Like, he goes back and there's the scene with Watto that's like super awkward because it's obvious that Watto's life has fallen apart completely. But there's nothing about like the system of slavery and any of the evils of it or whatever. Like, Lucas just sort of like, he just wants to move past that so that he can get on with, all of the symbols around Anakin. On to the next one, talking about why the Jedi can't win, but now we're going to talk about why it doesn't matter. Why? Because we can. And if we can, we do. Because we're Jedi. The Jedi cannot control the actions of other people to force those people to be good. They can ask, but the people don't have to listen. The Jedi can't force people to elect politicians that are actually going to serve their own best interest. Now, if you want to talk about the Jedi through the lens of ACAB, then the Jedi don't fix the problems within the system, because we can argue that like the system is in place to keep the people on the bottom at the bottom. And the Jedi are an enforcement arm of the system that is by its nature oppressive. And that's not how I would prefer to talk about the Jedi. Like, it's there, but I'd rather talk about them in different contexts. Like, I like them better this way. And so if the Jedi aren't responsible for the creation and maintenance of the structure, because the people that vote are responsible for that, and the Jedi aren't responsible for the system itself, because that, again, that's other people's responsibility, then a Jedi doesn't wake up every day and do their best to clean up the galaxy because they think they're going to win. A Jedi doesn't take a chisel to the iceberg every day because the goal is to finally be done with the iceberg. A Jedi does those things, knowing that no matter how much work you do in a day, there will be things on your to-do list for that day that you did not get to that are going to have to roll over onto tomorrow's already too full to-do list. Because the point isn't the outcome. The point is the process. Patience, persistence, compassion. These are the core components to what they do. It doesn't matter that you can't win, because your measuring stick on whether or not you were effective or successful or whatever that day isn't based on the outcome. To thine own self be true. If you did what you believed to be the right thing, then that is between you and the Force. And the outcome is outside of your hands. You're trusting in the Force that you're going to get the outcome that you wanted because you took the right and true and good action. But you can't know that. How does the archer hit the target?